Let me bring in our News Nation political panel today. Nationally syndicated radio talk show host and MSNBC contributor Michael Smerconish, Democratic strategist Chris Kofinas, and Shira Toeplitz, politics reporter for the Capitol Hill newspaper Roll Call. Thank you all for joining us. Chris, let me start off with an interesting thing that I have noticed today. You have both sides now saying, not even just implying, that they believe the other wants to go off the cliff for some kind of gain.
Well, I'm not sure what gain they think they're going to get. I mean, the Republicans, I think, are coming to terms with the fact that they have to budge on tax rates. That does not mean the Republican Party and, Speaker Boehner's caucus has come to terms with that. And so that, I think, is the crux of the political problem here for the Speaker in terms of how does he make a deal with the President and basically have enough support in his caucus. I think the President has been very clear that he's willing to make a deal. He's come down in terms of the amount of revenue from 1.6 to 1.4. Speaker Boehner came back with the same number. So at some point, the President can't negotiate with himself. And so I don't think the President wants to go over the cliff. I hope that Speaker Boehner doesn't want to go over the cliff. But at some point, you cannot accept a deal that doesn't make any fiscal or let alone policy or political sense.
Chris, let me play Democratic Senator Tom Harkin, what he said about conservative media and how at least he believes this is all playing out with them. Let me play it.
The conservative media, the Rush Limbaughs and their echo chambers around the country have really manufactured this. It reminds me of remember the Y2K crisis when we went to millennium? People were all scared and hyped up and everything. Nothing happened. And this crisis has been manufactured by the conservatives to scare people so that we will do something here in a hurry.
Chris, your thoughts on that comment?
Well, there is, I think, some real valuable concern that people should have about going over the cliff. What is the long-term economic impact? It's tough to say, because my guess is the way that Washington works, and I've seen it work firsthand, is they literally get right to the deadline, and then miraculously there's a deal. So I'm still somewhat optimistic that they'll get something done. But if we go over the cliff, it just sends a terrible message to the American people that our government can't work. And that's not the right thing we should be sending.
Absolutely.
That's not the right message we should be sending.
Shira, let me bring you in, because the polling that we have shows that people overwhelmingly, both sides, want to see some kind of compromise here. We just spoke with Congresswoman Moore. We've talked with a number of people on both sides of this, and it seems, though, that each side has their line in the sand, albeit not always clear. But I just want to play something from this morning. Congresswoman Jackie Speier talking about the possibility, or the lack thereof, in her opinion, of raising the Medicare age.
Will you exchange a tax hike for the rich for raising the age on Medicare, as you were just alluding to, that issue of Medicare?
That's the one area that doesn't make any sense. I mean, why should we do something that's stupid?
And we've heard the Republicans are holding on, if you will, as Chris pointed out. There's no reality in the storyline that they will not raise tax rates for the wealthiest. So what does that then mean for Democrats who have to somehow, the reply can't be, well, that's stupid to raise the eligibility age. There has to be another counter to that.
Right. I think it means that the final package, if we get a final package to vote on in the next week on Capitol Hill, is going to be a really unique coalition of some Republicans and some Democrats, assuming their entitlements are part of this package, which Republicans do not seem willing to have a package without. So in this case, I think some Democrats will be willing to vote for at least a framework of entitlement cuts, and then some Republicans will definitely be able to do it. But this is all going to be part of the final melting pot of votes that they're going to need to pass this if they get a deal.
Michael, let me look at some of the NBC News Wall Street Journal numbers. As we pointed out, 76% of all Americans, 61% of Republicans think it's okay to raise taxes on those earning over $250,000. That's the newest poll, but we know that's to be added into a laundry list of polls that all scream that same message. Tax rates must go up on the wealthiest. Why not get that portion of the deal done here when I don't know who does not agree with that at this point?
I don't know why, as a practical matter, as a political matter, the Republicans don't embrace that idea publicly instead of making it a part of their negotiated package, because if they were to do so, if Speaker Boehner were to embrace raising taxes for the wealthiest of Americans, I think there'd be a momentum shift, and that the White House would then come under increasing pressure to put forth more cuts. And your polling data also suggests that, you know, the vast majority of both Republicans and Democrats, they want compromise.
Right.
So why the R's don't take that step and I think have it inure to their benefit, I don't understand.
And the poll also, Michael, and I get all of your thoughts on this, the poll shows 38% trust President Obama in handling fiscal cliff talks. 19%, just 19, trust Speaker Boehner. 28% say they don't trust either of the men at this point. But when you just break it down with President Obama and Speaker Boehner, what do you believe they're reacting to there? Michael, do you think that's a gut reaction on who they believe is credible or honest, or who they believe has their back, if you will?
All of the above. I also think that it's a reflection of the election. I think that, and I hear this from callers, that, you know, people do believe that the president is entitled to have an upper hand, given that he just won the election. One other data that jumped off the page at me is the fact that 56% will hold everybody accountable and blame them equally if they don't cut the deal, Tamron.
And Shira, that's a great point that Michael makes, and we're going to talk about it. It's part of our gut check that folks, in the end, though, they will blame someone if they look up at the beginning of the year, and there is plenty, it seems, to go around when you're looking at the members of Congress.
Right, absolutely. And I think one of the reasons that the people have a lower opinion of John Boehner in a lot of these talks is people already have a very low opinion of Congress, and no wonder. They've been really incompetent when it comes to passing key legislation. And this will be the biggest of it all if they cannot pass a deal at all by the end of the year.
And Chris, I know you're a Democratic strategist, you're loyal to your party, but one of the reasons we enjoy having you on is that I believe you're a fair voice as well, and you've been critical when it's been necessary of your party. I'm not saying put Democrats in a box here, but the overall picture of Congress and this inability to compromise when we saw this situation coming. It was interesting to watch at the beginning of the talks. People were like, there's no way, they've got to reach a deal here. We're not going to have this 11th hour vote as we've seen way too many times. And here again, it seems we're headed in that direction. At least that's the storyline today.
Well, you know, party's nice, but I think the one thing that's great about this country is we all kind of put our country first. What the problem I think I have, and I think a lot of Americans have, is the word compromise seems to be a four-letter word in Washington.
Why is that?
At the end of the day,
is that to hold on to power? I mean, is it the cliche thing of, you know, it's my way or the highway, and that keeps me being the boss? So why is it a dirty word when in anything else that you negotiate, if you are buying a house, heck, if you are getting married, you guys sit down and you talk about where you want to live, what you want to do. Why does that seem to escape and evaporate from brains upon entering Washington, D.C.?
You know, it's a short-sightedness. I think sometimes the consequences aren't there. I mean, even in this last Congress, the overwhelming majority of Congress got reelected. And I think, you know, so it's one of this kind of conflicts that voters have. They want compromise, but they end up voting the people in who don't want to compromise in many cases. I think what has to happen here, and I think this Michael is right, the Republicans have to come to terms with some reality. And the reality is they not only lost election, they lost a policy argument. And the policy argument has to be solved with understanding the fact that you cannot simply do this with spending cuts. It is mathematically impossible.
And you can't say you want spending cuts without being specific. And I think what you're hearing a lot from people at home is that this focus seems to be, again, on those who have the least. And you look at Medicare or Social Security and you say these are where the cuts are supposed to take place. But when you look at the data, those are not significant problems facing us. There's no conversation about defense, and there's no specific plan coming from Republicans. And I think people become really offended in many cases when you start talking about Medicare and Social Security, because logic tells you, Social Security, that that's not the overwhelming problem in our budget.
I think you hit it right on the head. The amazing thing is, listen, you want to talk about entitlement reforms, at some point we're going to have to be serious about it, but let's not be serious about it on the backs of the people that actually need it to survive and to live. And in terms of defense cuts, for the life of me, and I remember this on the Hill, I don't understand why there's not a more serious discussion about scaling back defense cuts. War savings is not a defense cut. We are spending an enormous amount of money on defense. It's the largest chunk of our budget. And if we continue down this road of pretending, and Democrats and Republicans both do this, to be honest, of pretending that we're not going to reduce the defense budget, I don't know how we're going to achieve this miraculous spending restraint and balance that we need.
All right, Chris, thank you very much. Shira, it's a great pleasure having you on. I think this is my first time with you on News Nation. Michael, it's always a pleasure to see you. We'll see you tomorrow, Michael. Thank you, and still ahead.